Teenagers trafficked for sex, some sold by their parents. Experts say globally there are more slaves now than ever before. Today is Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and as 10 TV's Jim Heath reports, Ohio advocates and lawmakers are working to end the practice forever.
We call it America's dirty little secret.
The secret? People for sale in Ohio. It seems impossible, but it's happening.
This is just so important to me because as a minor child, I was taken and put into prostitution. And so at this point, when I see these girls that are being taken now, it is so important to me that we do something about it.
Arlene Carson has a personal story to tell on Human Trafficking Awareness Day. She says she spent 10 years as a prostitute, trapped in a life she didn't want, terrorized by a pimp who wouldn't let her go.
Countless girls are knocking on these doors saying, please help me, let me in, and get me out of these situations.
State Representative Teresa Fetter says about 1,000 Ohio children are forced into the sex trade every year, and thousands more are at risk.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done, particularly in the demand area. This is a demand-driven market. Everyone is learning that everyone is vulnerable.
Fetter's legislation, now law, describes girls and women being sold for sex as victims, not criminals. It also requires additional training for law enforcement and increased penalties for traffickers. Human Trafficking Awareness is reaching Columbus schools.
Students, they're very active. They have a really strong passion for human trafficking because it could be anyone. It could be your neighbor, your best friend. And so you really take that to heart because you want to make a difference.
Michelle Jones and her mom, Darlena, are working on bringing more awareness to students.
You see trouble and you go to help because that's what, that's who we are. That's what we want to do.
To help bring an end to modern-day slavery. At the State House, Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
Human trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, provision, or obtaining a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, and the person forced to perform such an act is under the age of 18 years.
Welcome to Part 4 of Violence Against Children, Human Trafficking. The purpose of this training is to help you identify incidents of violence against children and make appropriate referrals in such cases. Specifically, we will discuss how to recognize and intervene in incidents of human trafficking behaviors. Remember that you are not being asked to provide therapeutic interventions for the students involved. We hope you will be able to let the students know that you notice them and that you care, and that you will be able to refer the students involved to the professionals who are trained to provide interventions. For this section of Module 4, we have asked Darlena Jones, Grant Manager of the Service Learning Project, Stories Behind Their Eyes, to join us.
Child abuse and human trafficking share some characteristics. Each happen frequently and represent serious barriers to learning for young people. Whether a student is a target of violence by adults or by other students, the impact on the student's life and his or her learning can be profound.
For some young people, being a target of violence can result in other mental health issues such as depression, substance use, post-traumatic stress disorder, hypervigilance, self-injurious behaviors, and suicide, as addressed earlier.
Some young people who are targets of violence can become aggressive, abusive, and violent toward others.
School professionals can interrupt the destructive cycle of violence through proactive referrals.
Stories Behind Their Eyes was created in 2012 as a service learning project by Columbus City School students to create awareness on human trafficking.
There are 27 million people in modern-day slavery for sex and labor. That's more than in the African slave trade. 30,000 American children are at risk of being trafficked. The human trafficking industry makes $32 billion a year. In fact, the average price of a slave is only $90. 12 is the average entry age into sex slavery. Common places for human trafficking include spas, massage parlors, big events such as the Super Bowl, Olympics, an Arnold classic. Many victims are trafficked along highways, motels, and truck stops.
8. The ratio of convicted offenders to victims, 8 to 100.
7.
The life expectancy of a child prostitute is only 7 years.
6.
The youngest victims of sex slavery are 5 and 6 years old.
5.
5 out of 10 victims are minors.
4.
0.4% of victims have been identified. 99.6% have not.
3.
Ohio is the third largest state in human trafficking.
2.
Human trafficking is the second largest crime after drug offenses.
1.
It only takes one person to make a difference.
Be aware and share.
Human trafficking work or services may include anything from bonded or forced labor to commercialized sexual exploitation. Studies suggest that up to 90% of runaway youth become involved in the commercial sex industry.
On average, there are about 20,000 missing children reports per year in Ohio, with about 90% as runaways.
In human trafficking, there is the seller, the buyer, and the product or victim. The seller or trafficker are men and women from all walks of life. The seller could be an individual or an organized criminal syndicate that has predatory romantic involvement with the victim. The seller offers seemingly legitimate work opportunities for food, housing, clothes, and drugs in exchange for sex.
The buyers, or Johns, also come from all walks of life. The buyers feel as if they own the victim they purchase and subject them to painful, abusive fantasies. The buyers and sellers drive the sex trade and profit from the demand for commercial sex.
The following are components of human trafficking. The victim has typically run away or is homeless. Most minor victims willingly go with their trafficker or seller. Many minor victims do not think they are a victim and learn not to trust social services, law enforcement, or other authorities. Online solicitation is increasing with the use of social media and commercial sex websites.
The average age that a person first enters into the commercial sex industry is 12 to 14. Victims of human trafficking are not permitted to leave upon arrival at their destination. They are held against their will through acts of coercion and forced to work to provide services to the trafficker or others.
Factors associated with human trafficking of minors include
Presence of pre-existing adult prostitution markets in communities where large numbers of street youth are concentrated.
Prior history of child sexual abuse and child sexual assault. Large numbers of unattached and transient males.
Members in gangs, runaways, and homeless youth.
Recruitment by organized crime groups.
Possesses large amounts of cash and hotel room keys.
Has unexplained school absences and is unable to attend school regularly.
Looks like a minor while claiming to be an adult.
Has indicators of being branded, having a tattoo as an example.
Lies about her or his age and or possesses false identification.
Tells life stories with inconsistencies,
has little knowledge of his or her community where he or she is.
the minor is involved with an abusive or controlling partner or boyfriend, has signs of physical abuse and or injury, appears to be engaging in scripted communication, has fearful or anxious demeanor.
The minor appears hungry and or malnourished, wears clothing that is not appropriate based on season or weather, appears addicted to drugs, shows shifts in behavior, dress, or belongings, such as sudden possession of expensive items.
Does not have control over his or her own schedule, does not have control over his or her ID forms.
Minor talks about sexual activities that exceed age group norms.
Or the minor is involved with a boyfriend who is 10 or more years older than the potential victim.
Parents, educators, and community members should model healthy relationships and create environments that counter risk factors.
To prevent minors from participating in human trafficking, educators can draw on local violence prevention agencies to access effective prevention programs and best practices. Rahab's Hideaway and Grace Haven are both local organizations that help with prevention, identification, rescue, and restoration of the lives of human trafficking victims. Adults can contact their local coalition or violence prevention organization to have a speaker talk with students about avoiding the exploitation and violence against minors. To intervene and report human trafficking of minors, adults can contact their local law enforcement, county children's services, local rescue and restore coalition, and the National Human Trafficking Resource Center at 1-888-3737-888, or call 911 if in immediate danger.
You may refer to the resource tab of this Safety and Violence course to link directly to these and other local, state, and national resources. So, is referring all you can do? No. There are school-wide efforts to ensure schools are safe places. Places where kids who are depressed or suicidal get help. Where kids who are using alcohol and drugs are noticed. And where bullies, their targets, and children living in abusive homes are helped. This is the kind of school our children deserve, and that we can all work to achieve. We hope that you will work with your school improvement team or school climate committee to create schools like this. We have talked about many important issues that affect our students among the non-academic barriers to learning, including depression, suicide, violence, human trafficking, and substance use and abuse. It is important to recognize the interconnectedness of these topics and ultimately know what to do if you believe that a student is experiencing any of these emotional, behavioral, or mental health issues.
While you may not feel like an expert on each topic, the most important thing you can do is to recognize in students the signs and symptoms of distress. Reach out to them, tell them you care, and make the appropriate referral so they can get the help they need to be successful in school and in life.